Welcome everyone to the Dr. Abs Healthcast. I'm your host, Dr. Bryan Abasolo, aka Dr. Abs. And on today's show, we have women's health expert and best-selling author, Dr. Anna Cabeca. Dr. Anna Cabeca is an internationally acclaimed menopause and sexual health expert. She's a global speaker and pioneering promoter of women's health. She is Emory University trained and triple board certified in gynecology and obstetrics, integrative medicine, and anti-aging and regenerative medicine. She is the author of the best-selling book, The Hormone Fix, a diet and holistic lifestyle program for menopausal women, and the new release with the foreword written by Dr. David Perlmutter, Keto Green 16, designed for improving energy, hormones, and weight loss. Dr. Anna has reached hundreds and thousands of women around the globe, inspiring them to reclaim their optimal health and realize they can journey through menopause and find more purpose and pleasure than they ever dreamed possible. I can't wait to get this interview started, so let's bring on Dr. Cabeca. Welcome to the show, Dr. Cabeca. How are you doing today?
It is great to be here with you. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you on. And just a little recap on your life. How's everything going with COVID? I know Texas is one of the major hit states. How's everything in Dallas right now?
It's true. People are wearing their masks around and taking precautions. And we're here temporarily from Georgia because my daughter is doing rodeos, which are alive and well. Maybe they're not as crowded as they used to be, and people keep their distance and you just stay in your groups. But it's certainly alive and well. And that's been keeping us busy and really helping me with my daughter and her schooling. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's great to hear. Well, I'm glad you guys are staying healthy and safe. So, Doc, you are a women's health expert and a best-selling author. So I want to just get a quick synopsis on your books, The Hormone Fix, as well as Keto Green 16, which is your latest book, which we're going to touch a lot on today. So just give us a quick synopsis on Hormone Fix and Keto Green 16 so my audience can get a little bit acclimated with your content.
Yeah, thank you. So, as a gynecologist and obstetrician, I basically, at one point in my life, found myself with my own doctor's bag empty. I was 39, diagnosed with infertility and early menopause, and I'd failed cycle after cycle of the highest doses of fertility meds, injections, without response. I was told the only way I'd be able to have another child possibly would be egg donation.
Oh, wow.
And so my ovaries were written off. Here I am. I've helped so many hundreds, if not thousands of women achieve a healthy pregnancy. And I was struggling. And it was, we don't think, and this is now back in 2006, we as physicians typically don't say, well, here is what this condition looks like, and let's go about reversing it, right?
Yeah.
Well, as part of my journey, actually took a year off of my medical practice and went around the world. And it was basically a healing journey. Wasn't necessarily looking for answers, but I found answers.
Very cool.
That helped me restore my fertility and reverse my menopause, and became pregnant at age 41 spontaneously, naturally, and delivered a healthy baby girl.
Amazing.
So now I'm 54 with a 12-year-old. And I did homeschool my two older children at that time. So with the situation we're in now, we're homeschooling again this year. And I am thankful for that early training experience to help me be better at it this time, for sure.
Amazing.
But part of that journey and that transformation, and then really implementing these changes in my life, and then coming back into my practice full swing, booked solid, and integrating my conventional practice with really a huge amount of international wisdom, from Native American healers to Indonesian traditional medicine men to some of the leading scientists that I met around the world in New Zealand.
I was going to ask you where exactly, you said you found the answer. I was like, where in particular did you go to find these answers?
Oh my gosh, there was pieces, it's like putting puzzle pieces together, honestly. And it was really interesting because first we traveled part of the United States, for example, and we ended up in Arizona. And I was virtually introduced to a shaman who was a PhD psychologist from Harvard, and she went back to her roots as a shaman. And so it was my first really deep dive into something seriously unconventional for me and my training at that time. And from there, we went to South America. We went to Peru, and I met an Andean philosopher and healer. And the people in Peru, traditional medicine is normal. And so I learned about maca. I learned about cat's claw herb called una de gado. And I started, creating these combinations of these herbal medicines as to help me. And from there, really Peru was so fascinating, from the jungle medicine to the traditional wisdom to the food as medicine concepts. And it's pretty cool about maca. I don't know how much your audience knows about maca, but I'd love to share a little pearl about it.
Yeah, the warriors back in the day used to take that for virility and before battle. I mean, it's some powerful stuff. Absolutely.
It
But yes,
is.
share your testimony on that for sure.
Exactly that. When I was in Peru and I would tell people I'm infertile, they'd say, drink maca, some of our family friends that we had there. And they say, if you're struggling or tired, drink some maca. And then they would elbow my husband at the time and say, oh yeah, it's the Peruvian Viagra. And we're like, of course we're going to drink this maca, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so and then I looked at the science behind it, the chemical makeup of it, and why was it powerful and what research was behind it. And there's substantial. I put a lot of that information to good use. And then, in Brazil, learning about acerola and some of the additional, medicines from plants that we can use and incorporate that into remedies. And that was pretty cool. And from there we went to New Zealand and Australia, and actually went to one of the best scientific institutions in New Zealand. By chance, I met the the head of the institution while we were in Peru. So that was a beautiful connection. And so it was just like these serendipitous events. And we were in Asia and then to Europe and the Middle East. And so just from different places, I learned different pieces to really help me. And then I came back and I was on a mission to give other people this power back, right? This power over your own body back.
Yeah, no, and I feel like, everybody's, mainly in the United States and Western culture, it's like everybody's fixed on the traditional medicine model. And, here you are traveling the country, traveling the world and discovering all these like natural food as medicine type plants and things like that and remedies. So, I'm sure that like really opened your eyes to a whole new world, essentially.
It really did. And beyond the food. And that's what I really say about putting into the Hormone Fix, which is my magnus opus, right? I want every person to read this book. And I always said every woman, but I have had men. I actually had a 67-year-old zoologist who said he gives this book away to everyone he knows. He's already given a dozen copies away, and he's highlighted, marked so many sections. Being a scientist, he's like, these are just key pearls, not just about the food, but about the practices that make a difference, and understanding why these things can happen to our body and why that does, how that can affect us. So I always say it's only about 25% about what we eat, who we eat with, where we eat, when we eat. All of these things can really affect us too.
Factor, yeah. So let's talk about hormones and menopause. Now, your book, The Keto Green Way, how can going keto have a positive effect on your hormones and menopause?
Well, this is really key, and it can span our lifetime too. Especially this approach, my Keto Green Way, is really good for women who have irregular menstrual cycles, who have been diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome, have had issues with fertility, have again that we talked about earlier, just that mood swings or changes that can occur as part of hormone imbalance at any age. But specifically, as we age, our progesterone levels start to decline. And what that means is that with that, progesterone is the precursor hormone for cortisol, for estrogen, testosterone, DHEA, all these other really important hormones for reproduction, as well as for, building our body back up for our immune support. And beyond that, well, it turns out like research has shown that women get over 2 times as much Alzheimer's or dementia as men, but we didn't understand why. And we've looked at estrogen as part of the answer. And certainly it may be, but when we look at the curves where we look at the increase in symptoms, it really follows that decline in progesterone, which begins in our mid to late 30s. We start to experience that PMS, that irregular cycle, that symptom of hating your husband or your loved one 2 weeks out of every month, right? And I will say then it's your hormones, not necessarily your loved one, right?
Yeah.
But this shift is happening. Well, estrogen is necessary, we know, and I believe progesterone too, absolutely. But estrogen is necessary for glucose utilization in the brain. Ketones, however, bypass that mechanism.
Yep.
So even if we're overloading on carbs, glucose, we can still have this tremendous brain fog if we don't have enough estrogen on board. Well, that's going to create insulin resistance and further inflammatory conditions that is going to worsen brain fog the more glucose we get into our system. Ketones completely bypasses this, gives us our memory back, and just transforms, really transforms our life, because ketones as a fuel is like jet fuel. Glucose is like gasoline, unleaded, in fact.
The cheap kind.
Yes, the cheap kind. So we want to shift that. And I actually have a story of a client, and she's actually a very well-known clinician in England. And she said after her third baby, she just couldn't get her mind back. She had brain fog. She was in her 30s, had brain fog, had memory loss, was struggling with just anhedonia, didn't feel joy in her daily life anymore. And she really had trouble with depression and had tried many things, had been on different medications. And then she came across my first book, The Hormone Fix, and started following the program. And she said that her brain clarity, in fact, she interviewed me recently, her brain clarity is better than it was in her 20s. Wow. And it has just shifted her life. She feels like she is back in her body. And I've heard that from so many clients. Like, I feel like the fog has lifted. Look, I've been there. We think we're doing everything right. And it's often not. That's not the problem. It's a fuel problem, right? And it's this transformation that we go through for women when we're menstruating on a monthly basis, and in the transitional period of perimenopause to menopause, 35 to 55, especially during this time, it's a fuel problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, as far as your book, and, obviously I'm sure you talk about diet and, how to, the foods that you eat for the keto diet. I mean, obviously, we run on ketones. I actually started a keto diet on Monday, and I immediately feel sharper, with my bulletproof coffee, the grass-fed butter with the MCT oil and the black coffee. I feel great. Can you just go into a little bit of depth as far as the ketones versus the glucose, and why we need to feed our brains those ketones in order to just function at a higher level, essentially?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is where really, when we think about it, we know glucose as an energy source. It provides less energy than ketones do. But when we have carbohydrates, even good carbohydrates, like from fruit, right? From many of the starchy vegetables,
sweet potato,
we're getting
brown rice.
Yeah, exactly. It's good carbohydrates, but it's still going to convert in our system to sugar. And we need that. That's my whole Keto Green approach, is that we need those plant-based nutrients specifically to help support our gut microbiome, to help support our alkalinity, our, decrease inflammation in our body, to give us a really balanced nutrition, right?
Yeah.
And so we think of glucose in this way. That is first ready fuel, right? First and ready fuel. Our body will use that preferentially over anything else. Now, ketones is when we're getting into our fat stores, or we're getting fat like from the ghee, the coconut oil and MCT oil and butter. When we're either getting it from what our body has in stores or our diet. And we can use that fat for fuel in the form of ketones.
Yep.
and our body will metabolize those ketones. We can see them in the blood. We can see them in the urine. We can see ketone bodies. We can measure ketone bodies in the breath. So there are ways that we measure this. And I typically tell clients, if you're doing keto green approach, we want you to check. And I always say it's very easy, costs pennies a day. Check urine ketones, check urine pH, check these things and get them optimal for being able to say I'm having success or not having success.
Yeah, no, I use the urine strips. And then my wife actually tells me, she's like, you like smell different. I smell like alcohol, she says, but so I know I'm in ketosis when I'm doing that. So as far as the keto diet, I mean, I've heard of people call some people that do keto the dirty keto and then clean keto. Like, what is your recommendation? Like, are there foods, because this isn't all about, bacon and butter and, people are like ecstatic. Like you got to eat, the healthier versions of certain foods. So what could people find in your book as far as staples that are in that diet?
Yeah, and in Keto Green 16, I really narrowed it down to 16 ingredient types to make shopping easier, but to really cover the bases. So there is keto dirty versus keto clean, which I say is keto green, and that is important. And so when we think about staples, we also have to remember we are what we eat ate. We are what we eat ate, and that's really powerful. Because, and also not only that, but how they were, how they lived, how they died.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. I'm here in Dallas now. I live in Georgia, but we're here on the road for the rodeo right now for my youngest daughter. And one of the grocery stores, I went into this Middle Eastern grocery store, and it was amazing because they had this whole section of humanely slaughtered animals, hand slaughtered humanely. Oh, wow. So it was like, wow, that was, I just hadn't seen that before, but that means less stress hormones likely were produced by this animal at time of death, meaning that we ingest less of these stress hormones. Believe me, we can produce our own stress hormones in abundance. We do not want to get them from our food, let alone antibiotics and other hormones. And that's really important going keto, because I've had clients who have also expressed, aggression or depression or just this sense of malaise. We are what we ate, how they lived, and how they died. And that's really important to understand. We want to, as much as possible, choose healthy, grass-fed, pasture-raised, humanely slaughtered animals, and when we're eating meat. And so with my whole keto green approach too, it is like, smoked salmon, oysters, all like, it's a very omnivorous plan. And except there's no grains, no gluten, and no dairy in my Keto Green 16, because those are and no sugar, no sugar. There's a low carbohydrate greens, but because those are the four most common disruptors of hormone balance that will cause us obesity as we get older, brain fog, memory loss, hair loss. I mean, acne, skin conditions, you just name it. And it can be a daily battle for us. So we want to really incorporate these healthier choices when we're going keto. So wild caught fish, for instance, versus farm raised, and making these small adjustments, but adding in plenty of the alkalinizers, the fibers, those are prebiotics, and the fermented foods, those are probiotics, as well as digestive support foods. Because as we get older, we have digestive issues. The number one and number two most commonly used over-the-counter medications are antacids and anti-inflammatories. That will tear up your gut and destroy your microbiome. Makes you more immunosusceptible to diseases. And we don't want that. Absolutely. And so we want to strengthen the gut. We want to support our own bacteria within our gut, within our whole entire body, and improve that condition. So we have to look at having these combination of key foods to help with that detoxification, to help with that hormone balance. Yeah. And that's the combination of getting keto green.
Absolutely. And so like for your patients that have the menopausal symptoms, like what have you noticed that the keto diet, what kind of an effect is it having on your patients when it comes to menopause?
Yeah, definitely. One of the things I did, especially when early on I was struggling, right? And I developed this whole like, getting back into the science, this whole keto alkaline approach of doing things was, that like when I went keto, I just didn't feel good. And so that alkalinity factor was huge because I started measuring my urine pH and I was so acidic. I want you to do this, Bryan.
What's
Check
up?
your urine pH while you're doing keto and get in the alkaline. You can do that from mindset too. Oxytocin is the most alkalinizing hormone in our body. So, after a romantic evening, maybe you're more alkaline in the morning. And, incorporating in your diet too, more of the, low carbohydrate, the dark leafy greens, kale, collard, Swiss chard,
Wow.
beef greens, and then the herbs and spices. Chimichurri sauce is like magic. That is such
The
good
best, the best.
alkalinizing. That's perfect keto green accessory.
Very nice.
And incorporate these things. But that alkaline piece was what made all the difference. So when I first started incorporating this, I took my 8 most difficult patients. Now there are thousands of people that have been through my program, over 35,000.
Wow.
But I took these first 8 of my most difficult patients that I saw in my practice for years. And I'm like, okay, this is what's turned my life around. Here, you try it. Let's do this together. And that was my first group doing my keto alkaline or keto green, as it's called now, plan. And what they found is that whatever weight loss plateau they were in, they broke that plateau. How they were feeling mentally, they had better sharpness, better clarity, and also a sense of calm and peace. So that anxiety, that depression, that mood instability was gone. And those were all things that I had experienced. So I was thrilled to see that it wasn't just me. And now that led to the Hormone Fix and Keto Green 16, both bestsellers. There's key implementing not just the food, but intermittent fasting, no more snacking, getting a good night's sleep, a positive mindset, increasing oxytocin in our body. And all of this has positive physiologic effects in our body, from improving our blood sugar to improving our blood pressure to giving us good healthy skin and hair and stable moods, and makes this menopause transition shift. I've had women who experience hot flashes for over 10 to 15 years
Wow.
have them completely eliminate in 2 weeks. Women who no longer had a desire or interest in being intimate with their spouse or mate, to having a spontaneous libido again, and that interest again, and receptivity. And
Wow.
so that rekindling, and that's that oxytocin hormone. As we temper our most acidifying hormone, cortisol, which is in abundance right now, which
Very much
will
so.
it will be produced over everything else in our body to keep us alive, right?
Yeah.
And so, and it's very acidifying on our body. So I always say it robs Peter to pay Paul, if you've heard that expression.
Yes, I have. I have.
So, so that's cortisol, right? It will rob and steal, and not just, from our bones, from, our hair, if we're, from our skin, get wrinkles, graying of the hair. We can see that in every presidency, from the beginning of term to the end of term. I mean, Obama's
It's a
classic.
stressful job. It's a stressful job, let me tell you.
Yes, yeah, can see that. And you can see that rapid aging, and that's cortisol. And what so many people are experiencing right now is that cortisol stress. So I really think this whole concept, especially checking urine pH, something as simple as that, people can get pH paper anywhere, any pharmacy, any health food store. You can get pH paper or get pH strips with pH and ketones on them that can just make it easier. But just checking to get that pH at 7 or higher, 7 to 8 on an average basis, and see what shifts with you.
See where you're
That's a
at.
missing link with the keto plan.
Absolutely. Now, as far as, other tests and stuff, because I talk to a lot of functional medicine doctors, and they're always, check your blood, your hormones may be off, micronutrient deficiencies and whatnot. And you have a saying as it goes, it takes more than hormones to fix your hormones.
So
So,
true.
do you advise the audience out there to get your hormones level checked? Not only, check your ketones and your pH through the urine strips, but also, within your blood, get a blood test. And, what else does it take to fix our hormones other than hormones?
Yeah, no, it's so huge. And let me tell you, I love saying that because it really does make a difference. It takes a lot more to fix our hormones than
Yeah,
just our hormones. We've had
yeah,
patients, including myself, dialed in with hormones, right? Dialed
yeah.
in, and there's something else. And especially transitionally through midlife, 35 to 55. And
Mhm.
what we see is this, we see this shift. And and as a gynecologist, I always wanted it to be about, progesterone, estrogen, testosterone, and even DHEA, right? But sadly, after spending, so many years studying and hundreds of thousands of dollars paying for
Yeah,
that education, it's really about these other three hormones, and that's cortisol, insulin, and oxytocin. So
yeah,
cortisol, our stress hormone, like I said, it acidifies us. So in my Keto Green plan, the whole alkalinity components, not just about what we eat, but our mindset, meditation, you know, um, these practices can really improve the hormone cortisol and insulin. And so that's not something we'll give or take away from our body unless absolutely needed.
yeah.
And insulin, the older we get, the more insulin resistant we become. Well, snacking increases insulin resistance, causing
Mhm.
more obesity in most every woman I know, right?
Wow.
And men too, we'll add that on. Unless you're a really strong bodybuilder, endurance athlete, there are some exceptions to that rule.
Yeah,
But for the average of us, and especially during quarantine, we're becoming more insulin resistant unless we do these things.
yeah.
So, other than what do we need to do? The lifestyle shift, the intermittent fasting, at least 13 hours, preferably 16, hence Keto Green 16, 16
Got it.
key foods, 16 hours in between dinner and breakfast, and no more snacking. So that will create more insulin sensitivity. So if we're eating 2 or 3 meals, we're eating 2 or 3 meals, forget the snacks. And it's really challenging, especially when you're near your refrigerator at
Yeah.
home all day.
Is there any way that, because I see those keto snacks like the fat bombs and dark chocolate. I mean, are those acceptable? Like to sneak in here and there as long as they keep us in ketosis?
If it keeps you from reaching for
Like
that, banana nut
Snickers, yeah.
muffin, right, exactly.
Yeah,
And then use that in transition. Eventually you won't, and especially as you get into ketosis, you're not hungry. It's a habit,
got it,
right?
got
And
it.
if you want that like beautiful, and I have some of these recipes like a cardamom chocolate fat bomb, right?
Yeah,
Have that as your dessert at the end of your meal,
got it,
and just give your body time to have that space to fully digest your food. It
got it.
takes hours and hours to digest, especially a fatty, high protein meal, which is keto.
Yeah,
And as we get older, those digestive enzymes decrease. So I do recommend supplementing with digestive enzymes. And in my book, I talk about digestive foods like ginger, and I also have some digestive fruits that if they don't kick you out of ketosis, have a little bit of papaya, a little bit of mango, a little bit
yeah,
of pineapple. These will help with, these enzymes are powerful for digestion, support your gut, support your gallbladder, support your pancreas. And we need that to have this harmonious digestion. It's one of the hardest things for people to do. I mean, and sometimes I still snack, right? Like
yeah.
I'll have something, but and for me, it would be like a half avocado with olive oil and some Himalayan salt, something like
Yummy.
that. It's great.
Yeah,
So good.
yeah,
Always so good, right?
absolutely,
So, but that'll keep me to space to my next meal, right?
absolutely.
And that's perfectly fine. And having those cycles, those transitions, we shift a lot. And we want that like in working out, right?
Yep,
You want
yep.
that metabolic flexibility. You want that muscle confusion. You have to change things up.
Yeah, if you don't
And
challenge it, it won't change. Absolutely.
I love that. If you don't challenge it, it won't change.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Good.
So let's talk about neuroendocrine vulnerability. Now, do you feel like people out there are feeding their brains and their guts in the right way? Because there is that connection between the brain and the gut. Are we doing that today, or are we just slipping up when that's concerned, as far as that's concerned?
Well, I just tell you, riding now with all um, I notice the drive-throughs. Being on the road a lot right now for the rodeos, I notice the drive-throughs, right? Long lines at
Yeah,
Starbucks, long lines at Whataburger that are here. Whataburger didn't have them in the Southeast,
yeah,
but and I think that we're not. I think there's a lot of stress eating going on, and when we're stressed, we reach for carbohydrates. And that is going to actually hurt our microbiome and actually can cause increase in candida or yeast overgrowth, which is going to make us crave sugar more.
Yep.
So shifting out of this, and especially during this stressful time, is essential. And as kids are going to now be home with us, I think there's a mixed lesson in this. We're going to look at the silver lining, but when we control what the kids eat, that they're not going to school and eating candy off the teachers' desks, or they're not eating. When my daughter was in the public school, she said, "Mom, I had corn dogs and they were like mashed something that like a fried potato of some kind." And I was like, they call that's not food. That's not food. That's the not food. And so, and that makes crazier brain for the rest of the day for that child to learn with. So if we can cut out the carb, get out the starches from our house, from our homes, our kids are going to be more settled, more able to learn. You will see the sponginess of their brain, right? They will just soak up information, and they're not going to be bouncing off our walls.
Exactly.
And, you know, and I think that's really important, not just for their growth and development, but for parental sanity, for sure.
Yes.
Parental sanity. There's no sugar, no carbs on those stay-at-home study days at all.
you have full control. Absolutely. So to finish off, Doc, you know, let's say for my female audience out there that necessarily isn't in that menopausal age range, you know, what advice do you give these women, you know, in order to maybe prevent those future symptoms or delay them as much as possible, if anything?
Yeah, 100%. And we have women in their 20s through 80 doing my Keto Green 16. Word has spread. Families have, you know, brought this into their homes, men, women, etc. And what we've seen is just an important, you know, a regularity of their menstrual cycles, losing complete PMS. So feeling like, oh my gosh, my period's here. I had no idea. That can be a blessing to so many women. Monthly cyclical breast tenderness, gone. So doing these things, the intermittent snacking, getting Keto Green, checking your pH, do it now, because you don't want to be like I mentioned in my mid 50s, struggling with recreating new habits. Get these habits now. They will only support you and those you love around you. And if for hormonal balance, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. The sooner you can start, the less you're chasing your tail.
Absolutely. Wow. Such amazing information drop today, Doc. So just to finish off, you know, tell us about your social handles, what they are so people can follow you. Talk about the book, where people can find both the Hormone Fix and Keto Green 16.
Yeah, you can find my books anywhere books are sold. So Keto Green 16 and the Hormone Fix. And come visit my website at dranna.com. So DRANNA.com. And we have a great book bonuses to go along with them. So you just enter your receipt number wherever you've bought the book from, and you can get those bonuses as well, including some feast recipes and some quick start guides and all that to go along with it. And join me on social at Dr. Anna C on Facebook and my Keto Green community there, as well as on Instagram at Dr. Anna Cabeca. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yes. Thank you so much for coming on. Really, really appreciate you. Take care, Dr. Anna.
You too. Thanks.